You know, I've had some phenomenal guests on the show. Conversations that made me stop, think, laugh, and honestly, just feel inspired. The quality, the experience, the realness, it's blown me away. So we decided one episode just wasn't enough. This is the Top 10 series, a look back at the most relatable, impactful, funny, and learning-filled moments from the incredible guests who've joined me so far. And before we jump in, a quick shout out to our sponsor, Your 360 AI. They're changing the game in feedback and growth. Real conversations turned into real development. Yes, please. Because the world of work is changing fast and guessing just doesn't cut it anymore. Visit your360.ai to see how they're helping teams stop guessing and start growing. All right, let's get into it. In this episode, we'll dive into the top 10 learning moments, the practical light bulb ideas that actually make you better at what you do, no matter what that is.
For this listening audience, I'm trying to think of what's the most important thing for me to share, because there's so much I could say. And knowing well enough that more than likely your listeners aren't business owners, and maybe they never aspire to be business owners. So I don't think anything in that space, while maybe interesting, isn't going to be valuable. I think this concept of value is really important. And that I do believe spans. It doesn't matter if you're a business owner, you're an internal employee, or you're a stay-at-home parent, like whatever. There's this concept of value, and that goes back to that really difficult time where I was questioning, what is my value? And do other people interpret my value in the same way that I do? And how can we quantify that? And so this concept of value, it shows up a lot in my work around measuring the outcomes of learning. Like we ultimately want to put some kind of quantifiable value on the work that we do. And everybody, doesn't matter if you're in learning or you're in product or you're in customer service, there is a value to what we do, whether we're exchanging our time for money or we're investing in something like a real estate project or a business or something else entirely. There's a value associated with the time and energy that we put into things. And I think one thing we don't talk about enough is taking the time to reflect on, am I getting the returns? Like, is what I'm doing of value for me and my life? And I, there's obviously a value consideration for, is the work that you do of value for the business that you work for your boss? But also, what about me? Is the work that I'm doing and what I'm doing with my time and energy, is it valuable for me? And that, as a critical question, will shape the future of your career. For some people, there's a time in their life where they have small children and they just need a predictable paycheck to come in because they just want to be available and they want to give their energy to their kids. And so they stay in a job where maybe it's not giving them any value, but a steady paycheck. There's trade-offs to everything, but being really honest with yourself about what's the value that I'm getting in return for what I'm spending my time on. And am I getting the value that I want and deserve and need, or am I not? And having that reflective questioning as a regular thing you do, maybe not monthly or daily, but quarterly and definitely every year.
So the lesson really for me was that harsh lesson, like no one cares about your career more than you do. And I'm reading the let them theory, kind of popular right now. Let them, let me. And so it is let them, right? Let the company, let them do or decide what they will, but let me. So what am I going to do with my time? And how do I want to develop myself? And you get to choose that, right? I get to choose that, how I want to continue developing. And so that has been really freeing to tap in, because learner is one of my top 5 strengths. And so it's just brought so much joy of like, how do I want to grow as a person and give back those skills, right? What skills am I giving back that just fill me up?
That's really interesting. I'm pausing because been through. There was a period where my family went through some significant issues to do with births and deaths and cancer and all those kind of things, and they put work into clear focus. There's 2 or 3 phrases that I abide with, and one of them is that you work to live, you don't live to work, and that's really important. And putting work in its place in what you do in life is really important. So one of the reasons I stayed with so many organisations for so long was I wanted the opportunity to make sure I was coming home and seeing my boys when I came home from work, so that they would finish their college, whatever it was, school, and they would come home. One of my jobs every night was always to iron their school shirts for the next day. And I needed to be home to make sure their school shirts were ironed for the next day. And that was just something that we agreed as a family. I never went outside of that until they were old enough and comfortable enough, and we spoke about it as a family to say, there's these opportunities coming up and I will go here and there and wherever, which meant leaving and being overnight elsewhere in the UK and externally as well, outside the UK. So balancing work and life is really important, and it's making sure you have absolute clarity on how they go together. And that only came about because we went through a series, like I say, I'm not going to go into details, we went through a series of really challenging personal issues, and they just help understand working context.
Our customers or clients, they teach us so much, but our responsibility is to listen. Because if we don't listen, we don't hear what they're saying, and it doesn't help our business grow. And I know that seems so simple, and yet it's probably one of the hardest things, right? Yeah. Like, we think we know what they want. We think we know what's best for them, but they're telling us, that's not what I want. I actually want this other thing. Yeah. So instead of us, oh, no, but you really want this thing I created for you, right? Is listening to what they're actually telling us. So we used to sell these bags, like paper, like takeout bags, gift bags, right? And we used to sell them in cases of 250. And this lovely lady came in one day on a Friday, because I remember it was on a Friday, and she says, oh, I love these bags. They're beautiful. It was a brand new line that we had brought in. She goes, but I won't be getting them. And this had happened a few times, and we couldn't figure out why people weren't buying them. And so I finally asked her, well, what is the problem? Like, you said you liked them, right? And kind of asked her. She was really lovely. And she's like, well, they're a case of 250. I only need maybe 50. I have a craft fair this weekend, and so I just need a little bit, right? So I don't know, whatever thing that happened, I said, well, here, let me sell you 50. So I cracked open this case and I sold her 50. And then I'm looking at this case going, oh gosh, now I got this split case. This is going to happen. How long am I going to hold on to this thing for? Well, she came back the following Friday, a week later, and she says, I need another 50. These were a really good big hit. I'll take another 50. And I went, oh, okay, great. So I sold her another 50. Well, she came back a total of 5 times, which really was a full case. But the fact was, she couldn't spend all that money at once because she was, making her money each week. She didn't have room for this big old case of bags that she'd have to schlep around all these markets with her. And so I kind of went, well, wait a second. Maybe we shouldn't be selling everything in full cases. What if we sold things in smaller quantities, like this lady wanted? There's got to be more of them. And so that was the seed that planted the next phase of our business. And so what we did a year after that is we opened a store in a warehouse where we housed all of our product. But then in the front was this store, and it was open to the public. And you could just come in and buy whatever amount you wanted. Sure, you'd pay a little bit more because now we were opening the cases and stuff. And then we eventually had staff to help you and whatnot. Yep. But it was her little incident that sparked this thing of, hey, wait a minute, maybe there's an opportunity here. And so that became this little, mantra, if you will, that I always ask myself, where's the opportunity in this? No matter what, whether it's meeting a new person or whatever, what is the opportunity here? Because if there's no opportunity, then it's a waste of your time, right? But there are opportunities. Sometimes you just got to dig a little bit deep.
This episode is sponsored by Your 360 AI. Developmental feedback turned into actionable growth. Let's face it, the world of work is changing fast, and if your teams are not sharing honest feedback, everyone's going to be left behind. Your 360 uses voice AI to really uncover those things that surveys just miss. It is real conversations turned into real growth. Stop guessing and start growing. Visit your360.ai today.
Learning is literally your job, no matter what job you have. And so for an L&D person to say that, it drives me nuts. And so I have had, like I said, it's kind of an accidental thing, but sharing things to help others is probably the single biggest boost that you can get in your career. And speaking is part of that. And same concept, right? If you have a project, people love to hear what happened, good or bad, and just sharing that in a way to help people is an enormous boost to achieve whatever you're trying to do.
That. Bianca, what would you say we need to speak more about?
Yeah, it might sound very obvious, but building your network. And I know everyone is like, yeah, sure, I need to build my network, but it's quality, right? It's not, ooh, look at me, I have 10,000 followers on LinkedIn. Well, good for you, but what do you do with those connections, right? Also now in the world of AI, right? I heard you can have like bots that help you, increase those follower numbers, but that's a different conversation. So it's real connection. It's real networking. And I think Mike and my story is like a perfect example of what can happen if you really, truly lean into your network, right? And it probably that is an example of something that doesn't happen too often. I don't know, but there is new businesses out there all the time, right? Because people find each other. But yeah, it's not enough to just collect followers on LinkedIn or whatever social media platform you're on. How can you add value to your network? And so it kind of builds on what Mike was saying, like that sharing piece, right? But yeah, spend some time. Like I spend time every day. Sometimes it's 5 minutes, sometimes it's half an hour to just be on LinkedIn, right? And comment on someone's post, or share a post myself, a thought. And again, kind of builds on what Mike was saying. Sharing doesn't have to mean a long form piece of content. It can just be, hey, here's a thought and it just popped into my head. I'm going to put this out there and see what people have to say, right? So yeah, build your network, leverage that network, but don't just ask. You gotta give as well, right? It goes both ways.
But I will add to that, if you are sharing and helping, the times you do need to ask, I think our field is amazing. Of people will give you amazing amounts of help, and they'll give you their source files, and they'll do this and they'll do that. And I don't think there's a lot of other fields where you can find that, and that's a really cool space to kind of be working in.
I can name them and they still watch my Instagram stories, and sometimes I think, why? What are you watching for? Like, you don't like me, or maybe they do now, I don't know, but they didn't 20 years ago. So, and I do have a lot of compassion for people, and I've realized a lot. I think I was maybe about 15 when I heard the phrase hurt people, and it made me realize, gosh, that is so true. And now looking back at the people that bullied me, and probably the very little I know about their life, they did have a lot going on. You know, they did have things happen in their life, even that I was aware of, that people were just aware of, that they would tell friends and it would get around. Like, I think, gosh, you probably did it as a self-protection, and you being horrible to me made you feel somewhat more powerful, made you feel better about yourself very momentarily. And if that was their way of dealing with it, I don't condone bullying whatsoever, but I feel very sad for that, because I think the reality is it doesn't just happen in childhood. There's even adults, there's fully grown adults who have plenty of life experience that still act like those children do. But apart from when you're a child, you don't have the emotional intelligence to know what you're doing and why you're acting. Whereas as an adult, you do, and you can start to look more inwards and think, why am I acting like this? Is it a trigger from within me? Is it a self-protection? Is it a defense mechanism? And so I do have a lot of empathy for them. I mean, they did make my school life pretty horrific, but I do now think, I hope they've dealt with the things that they must have been going through, because that's a lot to carry as a child, and it's a lot to carry as an adult.
One of my favorite words is energy, and I think that we often say, I don't have the energy for this, or, we question how much energy is this going to take from me. But I think something that we gloss over is the fact that we get to create the kind of energy that we want. It's not necessarily something that you have to, it's kind of like motivation. It's not you either have it or you don't. It's how much motivation can you muster in the moment, or how much energy can you muster up in that moment. And one of the quotes from my book is, your experiences can only rise to the level of energy that you bring to them. If you show up disengaged and you're sitting back and you're crossing your arms and you don't have the patience for something, it's going to come across that way, and people are going to react to you in that way, and it's going to affect that entire experience for you. But if you can go in and you can lean in and you can be open to having a great experience, your understanding of what that time did for you is going to be positive, and you're going to walk away feeling like it was worth your time, and other people are going to have seen you in a way that adds value to you in their book, right? In the way they see you. And so energy is not something that you either have or you don't have. It's something that you can kind of conjure in any given situation. And I want to encourage people to do that and to be that person that shows up with energy, because it's contagious. That's the other thing that I think we forget, is that if the room is down, it's probably because one person was a crab apple and it just kind of spiraled from there. But the same thing can be said for the positive spiral, in that if one person shows up with a lot of energy, it's likely to kind of rub off, and you can be that person.
I think one of the things that we should consider is external expectation versus internal motivation. Right? So here's what I mean by that. There may be external expectations for you to show up a certain kind of way. There may be messaging in your sphere that says that you must do this or must do that, that you have to do something a certain kind of way, that you have to move through the world and the universe a certain kind of way, that you have to move through your career and your work a certain kind of way. There's that. Those are the external voices. The internal motivation may be saying something very different, right? So internally, you may be thinking, I know that society says I need to go in this direction as it relates to my career, but that's not the direction I want to go in. I really want to go over here. Or society says that I should really be focusing on this, but I really want to focus on that. So when there's this conflict of external expectation and internal motivation, that's where there is conflict. And so one of the ways in which I believe you can resolve conflict is to get in touch with your own internal motivations for where you want to go in your career. That's professional. And I would even apply that to personally. Where do you want to go in your life? Minimize those voices that cause you conflict, and maximize those voices, including your own internal voice, that gets you to what internal motivation is for you and what that looks like and how it shows up in your own life. So when we can kind of resolve those differences between external expectations and internal motivations, I think that somewhere in the middle is where we find a purpose-driven life. And that's where we find authentic joy, authentic purpose, and most important, a sense of fulfillment.
Oh,
so the first, let's say that the first 3 months were a struggle with zero solutions, I would say. It was purely them fighting me back, me fighting them back. There was no alignment. And somehow, it's interesting because I feel like I had to leave those moments to be able to transition into being more than I was back then, because I lacked all the skills. Let me be clear, I had nothing. And I think a point came when I was like, I cannot do this any longer. Like, something needs to change because I hate this. Like, I hate my job. I hate waking up and going to the office. We were going to the office back then. Like, seeing these people live, I could see it on their face that they hated me as well. So it was a big push for me to just do something different. And I am a big believer that if you want others to change around you, you need to change something in yourself as well. So that's how I said, okay, let me go back to therapy. It wasn't something new for me. I've done it before in other instances in my life. So that's when I went back and I started understanding again what was keeping me back, why were those relationships not functioning for me, and I started those tough conversations, one-on-one conversations with every team member that I had, being very vulnerable myself, which is not, I have to admit, I'm thankful for that to my parents probably. It's not very hard for me to be vulnerable, but I can see it in other people managers around me. And I, just like you said, as an L&D, I've supported leadership development as well. I can see how hard it can be. But I feel like if I haven't done that, there were so many questions left unanswered, and there were so many unclear goals and intentions behind the behaviors that I was seeing in the team and the behaviors that I had. So just setting these one-on-ones, being very vulnerable myself, the big surprise that I had was that others started opening up to me as well. And, crying my eyes out in these meetings together with my team. And then, because these relationships started becoming better, we had a healthy foundation to build a team as well. Because they started trusting that whatever I was saying wasn't against them, although it was a very different way of doing things, but it wasn't against them, but it was actually for the good of the team, for the good of each individual, for the good of the organization as well. But I learned that I first had to earn that trust to be able to do any sort of change management, if you'd like.
I did a wonderful exercise once, and I'd recommend it. And I don't know where it came from. I learned it in a self-development course, and it was no doubt picked up by whoever was teaching that course, by others. But look back through your life and divide it up into little segments of probably a year, 2 years at maximum. And at points where there was a change, you changed job, you moved to university, something happened where there was like a change. And then with appropriate glass in hand of whatever's your favorite, drink, is just reflect on those periods over a few weeks. Reflect on those periods of your life and say, during that particular period, what was it that happened to me or that I did that really felt like I was here on purpose, felt like the universe is just working, there's plenty of juice here, it's worth the squeeze, however you want to describe that. And there may be periods in your life where there was nothing, just desert, no juice. There were other periods where you had lots of things, and you might have felt the juice for 5 seconds, 5 minutes, 5 days. It doesn't really matter, but make a note of all of those things where you felt the juice was worth the squeeze in life. And then look for the common thread in that. And it's really interesting exercise to do. And sometimes it won't be till even weeks later you suddenly think, oh, I know what it was. For me, it was when I'm teaching someone, when I'm working with them to do something, and that might have been helping them rebuild their motorbike or something, because I'm a mechanical and engineer, or teaching them how to light a fire with wet wood in the middle of the Zaire jungle. But it was teaching. It was helping people do something they were previously unable to do, and that got them excited to be able to do it. So that's one of the things that kind of takes me forward, and it's the litmus test I can then use for any decision I've got to make about a business deal or some job or a contract or a project or almost anything, is, does this resonate with that juice that I remember?
And because I really struggle with top 10 lists, here is a bonus or two.
We have to do it afraid, and I think we have to do it terrified, and I think we have to do it not knowing, because my answer was always, I don't know whether I'm good enough to do this. I don't know. The truth is, I've never witnessed myself, I can fill in the blank, do whatever thing I was, I remember flying to deliver an executive offsite for a CEO and his team of senior executives, and I was so terrified that I actually prayed for the plane to crash on the way over, because I thought that would be easier. If the plane crashed, that would be so much easier than walking into that room and trying to handle that room of very powerful personalities for 2 days. But again, the plane didn't crash, so I had to do it. And I did it.
Thank goodness.
And I handled it well. And, things I learned I could have done differently, of course, always. But I got through it, and now I know how to do that. I know how to handle that kind of demanding personality, very powerful title, that room of tension filled where a team didn't trust itself and trust each other. And so that's a lot of tension. So I think we need to do it afraid. You don't need to throw yourself in the deep end of the swimming pool either. It's like that saying, do one thing every day that scares you, so you flex that muscle. So that you know how to, you can't wait. You got to do it afraid.